Although the majority of German military deaths occurred on the Eastern Front, German losses on the Western Front were almost irreplaceable because most of Germany's resources were being allocated to the Eastern Front. This meant that very few reinforcements were being sent to stop the advance of the Western Allies. In the first phase of World War II in Europe, Germany sought to avoid a long war. Germany's strategy was to defeat its opponent in a series of short campaigns. Germany quickly overran much of Europe and was victorious for more than 2 years, by relying on a new military tactic of offensive weapons along a narrow front. These forces would drive a breach in freely behind enemy lines, causing shock and disorganization among the enemy defenses. German air power, Luftwaffe, prevent the enemy from adequately resupplying or developing forces and theory from sending reinforcements to seal breaches in the front. German forces could in turn encircle opposing troops and force surrender. Luftwaffe is a generic German term for an air force. It was also the official name for the Nazi Air Force founded in 1935, led by Hermann Göring. It became the largest and the most powerful in Europe by the start of World War II. The Atlantic Wall was the name given to a massive coastline defensive structure built on Hitler's orders, that stretched all the way from Norway along the Belgian and French coastline to the Spanish border. The Atlantic Wall covered a distance of 1,670 miles, and it formed the main part of Hitler's fortress Europe. The wall was built to repulse an Allied attack on Nazi-occupied Europe. Wherever it was planned for, the building project was vast, and most of it was along the French coastline, where it was assumed by the Nazi hierarchy that an Allied landing most likely be. The Maginot Line dominated French military thinking in the interwar years. The Maginot Line was vast fortification that spread along the French-German border but became a military liability when the Germans attacked France in the spring of 1940 using blitzkrieg, a tactic that completely emasculated the Maginot Line's purpose. D-Day. The Allies were planning a large invasion of Western Europe known as Operation Overlord. After months of preparation, a huge Allied invasion force, commanded by General Eisenhower, prepared to cross the English Channel and invade Nazi-occupied France. D-Day, as the day of landing Normandy was called, came on June 6, 1944. The success of the invasion depended on coordinating thousands of ships and planes. The landing troops had to secure beachheads within the first few hours before German guns and tanks could stop their efforts to move inland.
Operation Garden Market. On 17 September 1944, the airborne element conducted the largest daylight drop of the war up until that point. The pre-invasion bombardment by B-70s of the 8th Air Force was very effective in reducing German anti-aircraft defenses. Heavy flak that was so instrumental in breaking up the formations of the C-47 troop carriers in the Normandy drop and thereby causing the paratroopers to be scattered to the wind, wasn't present in Holland. Light flak and daylight benefited troop carrier commands' navigational accuracy and the airborne infantry and artillery regiments' assembly time once on the ground.
Operation Overlord. Winston Churchill said that the Operation Overlord was undoubtedly the most complicated and difficult ever undertaken. With nearly 3 million troops involved, it was an incredible feat of organization. and the first step towards the liberation of Western Europe and the defeat of Nazi Germany. Follow the Allies as they land on the Normandy coast on June 6, 1944, that will forever be known as the D-Day, and then track their hard-fought campaign to liberate Paris.
Battle of Britain. The Battle of Britain was a struggle between the German Luftwaffe, commanded by Hermann Göring, and the British Royal Air Force, headed by Sir Hugh Dowding's Fighter Command, which raged over Britain between July and October 1940. The battle, which was the first major military campaign in history to be fought entirely in the air, was the result of a German plan to win air superiority over southern Britain and the English Channel by destroying the British Air Force and aircraft industry. Hitler saw victory in the battle as a prelude to the invasion of Britain, codenamed Operation Sea Lion. In May 1940, German forces had overrun Belgium, the Netherlands and northern France using blitzkrieg, which is lightning war tactics. With the USA and the Soviet Union both still mirrored in hesitant isolationism and the French ally toppled, Britain now stood alone against Nazi Germany. Yet as Hitler turned his attention to the British Isles in the summer of 1940, directing a force over 1,350 bombers and 1,200 fighters, first against shipping, airfields and finally against towns, it became apparent that the Luftwaffe had the odds stacked against it.
The Battle of the Bulge, fought over the winter months of 1944 to 1945, was the last major Nazi offensive against the Allies in the World War II. The battle was a last-ditch attempt by Hitler to split the Allies into two, in their drive towards Germany and destroy their ability to supply themselves. Started on December 16, 1944, Hitler had convinced himself that the alliance between Britain, France, and America in the western sector of Europe was not strong and that a major attack and defeat would break up the alliance. Therefore, he ordered a massive attack against what were primarily American forces. The attack is strictly known as the Ardennes Offensive, but because the initial attack by the Germans created a bulge in the Allied front line, it had become more commonly known as the Battle of the Bulge. Was to launch a massive attack using three armies on the Allies, which would, in his mind, destabilize their accord and also take a huge port of Antwerp, throughout which a great deal of supplies were reaching the Allies.
Battle of France. In World War II, also known as the Fall of France, was the German invasion of France and the Low Countries, executed from May 10, 1940, which ended the Phony War. The battle consisted of two main operations. In the first, Fall Gelb, which is Case Yellow, German armored units pushed through the Ardennes to cut off and surround the Allied units that had advanced into Belgium. The British Expeditionary Force, BEF, and many French soldiers were however evacuated from Dunkirk in Operation Dynamo. In the second operation, Fall Rot, Case Red, executed from June 5, German forces outflanked the Maginot Line to attack the larger territory of France. Italy declared war on France on June 10. The French government fled to Bordeaux and Paris was occupied on June 14. After the French Second Army Group surrendered on June 22, France capitulated on June 25. For the Axis, the campaign was a spectacular victory.
Key people. Adolf Hitler was a German politician who was the leader of the Nazi Party, Chancellor of Germany from 1933 to 1945, and Führer of Nazi Germany from 1934 to 1945. As dictator of the German Reich, he initiated World War II in Europe with the invasion of Poland in September 1939 and was a central figure in the Holocaust.
Dwight D. Eisenhower.
bringing to the presidency his prestige as commanding general of the victorious forces in Europe during World War II. Dwight D. Eisenhower obtained a truce in Korea and worked incessantly during his 2 terms to ease the tension of the Cold War. He pursued the moderate policies of modern republicanism, pointing out as he left office, America is today the strongest, most influential, and most productive nation in the world. Erwin Rommel, popularly known as the Desert Fox, was a senior German army officer during World War II. Rommel was a highly decorated officer in World War I and was awarded the Pour le Mérite for his actions on the Italian front. In World War II, he distinguished himself as the commander of the 7th Panzer Division during the 1940 invasion of France. His leadership of German and Italian forces in the North African campaign established his reputation as one of the most stable commanders of the war, and earned him the nickname of the Wüstenfuchs, the Desert Fox. He later commanded the German forces opposing the Allied cross-Channel invasion of Normandy in June 1944. George S. Patton. General George Smith Patton Jr. was a senior officer of the United States Army, who commanded the United States 7th Army in the Mediterranean and European theaters of World War II. But is best known for his leadership of the United States 3rd Army in France and Germany following the Allied invasion in Normandy in June 1944.